until you have a blister, you don't think too much about your heel. But like, of course, you know you need it to walk and you know how important your legs are and mobility, but you don't sit around thinking about how grateful you are for your heel all that much. But as soon as you have something wrong with it, it's all you can think about. And so I feel like that's sort of where we are.
Welcome back to the J100 podcast. This is a show that often lives in the language of power, politics, institutions, conflict, and the forces that shape the Jewish world from outside in. But today's conversation moves in the opposite direction. It begins on the inside. My guest is Zibby Owens, author, podcaster, and one of the most influential builders of literary community in American Jewish life today. Zibby doesn't work in headlines. She works in sentences. She doesn't organize movements. She gathers people around books, around stories, around the quiet, stubborn human need to feel seen. And yet, in a moment when Jewish identity feels newly exposed, newly tested, and newly urgent, her work may be more political than it appears. We talk about growing up Jewish in New York, about walking through elite campuses at a time when many Jewish families are asking hard questions about safety and belonging. We talk about losing her best friend on September 11th, how that single moment reshaped her relationship with time, fear, and meaning. We talk about AI, artificial intelligence, creativity, and the difference between imitation and voice. And we talk about community, not as a brand or a platform, but as something built slowly, one conversation at a time, in a world that increasingly pulls people apart. This episode isn't about winning arguments. It's about holding space, about what stories can do when politics can't, about why in times of fracture, people don't just want information, they want to matter. This is a conversation about books, but it's also a conversation about belonging. I'm David M. Cohen, and this is the J100 podcast. My first question is the name Zibby. Actually, it's a fascinating name. What can you give me a little background on that? Where does that come from?
It's short for Elizabeth.
Oh,
And
okay.
when I was young, a girl in my playgroup couldn't pronounce Elizabeth, so she called me Zibeth, and my parents shortened it to Zibby.
Fascinating. Okay, that makes perfect sense. So where was this playgroup? I think it was in New York City. Tell us a little bit about kind of where you grew up, if you don't mind.
Yes, I grew up only a couple blocks from where I live now. It's pretty pathetic how short a distance I've traveled, but I'm still in my same neighborhood. And the playgroup was probably around here because my friend also grew up around here, but now she lives in Connecticut, although we are still good friends. Uh, so yes, I grew up here. Um, I went to a private girls' school. I went to Temple Emmanuel Religious School on Wednesdays and was bat mitzvahed there, and went to the Jewish Center camp in the Hamptons for the summers. And that's some of it. My grandparents divorced and remarried before I was born. Well, my grandmother remarried to a wonderful man, Cal Levitan, who was a rabbi. So I grew up with a grandfather who was a rabbi, even though by blood he is not technically my grandfather.
Fascinating. Okay, so you got some rabbinic roots there. I like that very much. So I noticed that you went to the Ivy League, I think, if I'm not mistaken, for undergrad
I
and
did.
graduate school, and that must be. I mean, you must have a lot of thoughts just on. Well, I mean, tell us kind of what it was like back in the day when you attended the universities that you did, and kind of maybe what it's like right now, looking back or looking forward, like kind of what what
Sure.
seeing was going on. Yeah.
Yes. I went to Yale undergrad and I went to Harvard Business School and had literally no anti-Semitism. I saw none of it. I can't even think. I can't even think of any personal um, attacks of any kind. Obviously, I was well aware of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. I took a class. Oh my gosh, why do I always forget this fabulous teacher's name? But she was like a legend at Yale. I took her class on descendants of Holocaust survivors and did a whole report on the emotional ramifications of that, in this not in the immediate generation, but the grandchildren, as well, which is ironic because now I am working with so many descendants and did so in my book and everything. But I've been interested in all of this for a long time. Um, I am obviously incredibly concerned about what's been going on college campuses the last couple years. I also have twins who are 18. In
Oh,
fact,
wow.
as we're talking, we're days away from finding out about their early decisions to colleges. But so I've had the opportunity to sort of be visiting campuses in the midst of all of this and following closely. I really appreciate the ADL's report card that they came out with on different colleges, which I found to be very useful. But it's crazy when a whole new lens is dropped onto things that you have preconceived notions about already. Changes things like where you want to go to school, how you want to vote, just like all these. Everything has been recalibrated, I feel like, since October 7th and today's world with the golden age of this sort of perceived freedom being gone, or not freedom, perceived safety, even though it wasn't totally safe. I mean, I wrote a whole essay as soon as the Pittsburgh thing happened. Like, I'm well aware, and always have my spidey sense up, but now obviously it's different. I just spoke to a congregation in Toronto yesterday, and at the end of it, someone was like, "It's so nice that you like to speak out, but be safe because the police are literally in my neighborhood and there are, it's, I don't feel safe there myself." And I was like, okay, so here we are.
I'm curious, I'm going to be zigzagging a little bit here in our conversation, but do you feel that in the social circles that you travel in, that people feel and think the way you do in terms of what you just articulated as kind of like the way I understood it or heard it was that, it's a different time post October 7th. And we're kind of, you are reassessing a lot of kind of assumptions or, uh, things you took for granted, let's say, in terms of safety or being Jewish. Do you sense that that is the norm or do you sense that that is exceptional in terms of the people you interact with?
I find that to be the norm for the Jewish people I interact with. Um, Not all. I mean, let me rephrase that. It depends on where they grew up. Um, and how old they are, and just like their community, where they went to school. Did they go to Jewish day school? Were they the only Jewish girl in a class of 2000? And I know people in all these situations. Um, so depending on how it was affects how they think about it. But for people sort of in my boat, which is being in circles where there are many Jewish people, um, and just like sort of going about our business essentially,
Right.
not making our Judaism, not that we didn't take it seriously, of course we did, but it didn't need to be like front and centered.
I was going to say, I
And
think,
now it has escalated. It's like if you have I mean, this is a horrible example. Like this is I don't mean this in any disrespectful way. I was just trying to think of a random analogy, but like until you have a blister, you don't think too much about your heel. But like, of course, you need it to walk and you know how important your legs are and mobility, but you don't sit around thinking about how grateful you are for your heel all that much. But as soon as you have something wrong with it, it's all you can think about. And so I feel like that's sort of where we are. It's a bad analogy, but I'm tired.
it's actually a beautiful analogy, but it's actually a very apt analogy that we take things for granted. Because there's not it's definitional to who we are, but it doesn't necessarily come to the fore on a daily basis, and what October 7th did on some level was kind of, whether we liked it or not, put in our faces kind of like it became front and center, and it was always crucial and essential. We just weren't always as cognizant of it as we are now. That's where
Or we knew it, like it logically. You just don't have to focus on it as much. Just
Right.
like kept us going, right?
You don't have to, like, wear it on your sleeve, I guess. You
Right.
kind of like, whatever. Everybody has different levels of, observance and engagement, but whatever it is, like, people would go, well, yeah, okay, people would go on high holidays or whatever Judaism meant to them. It could be a Passover Seder, or it could be just, pride in being Jewish or Israel, and now many people were kind of thrust into a storm of kind of having to speak or defend or speak out and be a lot more in touch with it. And that's obviously in some ways a lot of people have kind of been galvanized and have really, let's say, awoken or really kind of tapped into that. And I'm sure many people, have run from it. I'm sure there's a lot of different, uh, you
I
know,
mean, being a rabbi, how do you feel about this? Are you like, guys, I've been talking about this all along. Like, hello, like now you're interested? What the heck?
no, it's interesting. Like, my upbringing certainly parallels yours in certain ways, maybe different in other ways. I grew up in New York, uh, went to private school, also never confronted anti-Semitism. I was Orthodox. I was, in kind of synagogue life and yeshiva and things like that. But yeah, I never really I didn't walk around fear mongering or anything like that. I always felt incredibly comfortable in the United States and um, really felt that Jewish people were embraced and appreciated for being a minority that really excelled in so many ways and contributed in so many ways. And maybe was a little bit naive in terms of what people really think or thought, etc. On some level. So yeah, it was definitely. I don't. Yeah, I don't. my experience is not so different. I don't think I kind of. I think I was taken. I was taken by surprise a little bit.
So
Uh,
what made you become a rabbi?
um, okay, interesting. So the truth is, you mentioned your grandfather was a rabbi. So my maternal grandfather was a rabbi, and he was a very prominent figure in my life as a role model, as somebody who, when I was young, I was kind of like one of my sons is a super cool guy. He's a great athlete. I was kind of not spiritually inclined so much in my teenage high school years, but he was always kind of there as a voice in the background encouraging me and prompting me to tap into a spiritual side and that life has greater meaning besides the things I was exclusively engaged in. And I didn't really take him so seriously at that juncture of my life. But then in my early 20s, when sadly he was no longer, he was still alive, but he wasn't kind of cognizant or able to kind of be that presence, I began to hear his voice more coherently. And although I pursued a career in the legal profession, I'm in a whole different sphere right now, but I did pursue a career in the a legal profession as well. But I also kind of pursued a rabbinical career because of the admiration and that voice that was.
So did you go to law school and divinity school? Or what
Yeah,
not divinity school. Yeah, you did
yeah,
both?
yeah. I went for ordination at
Yeah.
Yeshiva University.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
went to Columbia Law School. Yeah, so I did
Sure.
study both. In my early years, I was an attorney in firms in Manhattan, and I was also a pulpit rabbi on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And then I metamorphosized into every decade into something a little bit different, which we'll talk about you because I know you also had different metamorphoses and different transformations. I'm going to ask just
I'm much more interested in talking
Oh,
about
okay.
you.
But since I'm the host
You
of the guys, we'll have to talk more
No,
about your
I am
side.
much more interested
But it's
in
fine.
your
I
story.
don't know if our audience is.
I know my story already. They probably don't know your story.
No, no, it's fine. I'm happy. Maybe I'll be the guest. I'll be the guest host. So that'll be cool. I am curious though, and I'm happy to kind of banter and use the parallel experiences. I'm curious, uh, when you were young or when you were developing, let's say even before you went to college, like what were your aspirations or thoughts professionally? Did you have? And does it align with where you are today, or was it something very, very different?
I wanted to be an author, like, my
Always
whole
wanted to be
life.
an author. Like
I
that was
always wanted to be an author. I wanted to be, like, um, the youngest my dream was to be, like, the youngest novelist ever. So,
okay.
that ship sailed, many moons ago. But, yeah, I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to be a writer, um, in whatever shape, but then once real life hit and I realized that, like, oh, you can't just, like, sign up to be a writer on day one, like, you have to get jobs and, like, there is no entry level author position essentially. Or I mean, I tried those. I tried, like, working at a magazine and
People come
putting
work at the Alma. That's exactly what I have all these great people in their 20s. That's exactly how they get started.
yeah. Well, I should have done that. I instead, I interned at Vanity Fair one summer and I loved, like, magazine writing too. I figured books might take me a little bit, although I started writing well, anyway, um, I realized sort of by the end of the first week at Vanity Fair that there was no path. That, like, if I started as, like, the junior assistant and the intern and whatever, like, I was literally filing contracts for all the big deal authors, and I was the one, refiling, and I was like, "There's just no trajectory where I can, like, keep going up the ladder and eventually, like, that's my contract in there. It's just not gonna happen." So it's not to say I gave up on it, but I was like, "I'm gonna have to attack this a different way, uh, and continue writing on the side, but I don't think I wanna do this full time, because I'm interested in, like, so many different things." So, it ended up being a windy road to here, and, there are some consistent threads, which is I'm really interested in human behavior. I mean, it sounds so basic, but that is my main interest. That's why I like to write. That's why I like to podcast and read and, all the things I
We
do.
share
And
that in common, very,
yeah,
very much so. We may express it differently in certain ways, but we share that in common, okay.
if I were better at languages, I would consider being a rabbi. I really I like the idea, by the way, of like giving a speech every week and having a community that like shows up. I mean, not to say they all show up, but you know what I mean? Like
Sure,
there
sure.
there are some very appealing things of like uniting and inspiring and connecting and learning and digging deep and, analyzing the same passages again and again, like learning from history. Like I get that. I get it. I'm just like not suited intellectually for your job.
How did you so how did you in those early years, like, what was it or who was it that made you realize that that was your passion, that that's what you wanted to do, that that's how you were gonna express yourself? You said from the earliest, moments when you thought professionally you were gonna be a writer of some sort, like, was that somebody? Was that something? Like, what was it?
um It was a couple of things. One, I just loved reading. So I I just obsessed over books. I wrote letters to authors. I had a pen pal relationship with an author in Michigan who every time like my husband's watching football and we watched like Michigan, I'm like, I had letters from this one author in Michigan. Um which we corresponded for I don't know, a year or so, and then she came to the city and took me to tea at the plaza, and I thought like I had just died and gone to heaven. I just like was
Oh,
so over the moon. I thought authors were just amazing, and I wanted to be one. I was like, "Can that even be a thing?" And so I just, like, got to know
mm,
authors more in their way, and when I got older, I was going to all the library events and Barnes& and Noble events and all of that. Also, once I started writing, people not to say people praised me for it, but, like, as soon as I started to write, people were like, "Oh, you can do this, like, this is pretty good." And my grandparents, the same rabbi grandfather, Papa Cal, and my grandmother, um, who I called Gagi, he ran a miniature printing press.
really?
He published my first 2 short stories in this little tiny book form, um, which I have.
Wow.
Uh which is this little book, um, Finders, Keepers, Losers, Weepers, and How the Donut Got Its Hole, which was in the style of Rudyard Kipling, which was one of my assignments. And it was like this beautiful little thing with these marbled end papers, and I had an about the author at the end. And I mean, I think I was 10. Was I 10 or 11? Um, anyway, I thought that was just the greatest. Wait, hold on. I'm seeing if it says where my about the author is. I think they put it in the front. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, it just says what year I was born. Oh, wait, but copyright December 1985. Oh, I was 9. This was printed when I was 9, actually. I was born in 1976. I have to retell the story. You said to tell you something I hadn't told anybody. I guess that's it. I've been saying my whole life I was 10 or 11, but actually it was printed when I was 9. And it has my name on the spine, as you can see, and for listeners. And I was like, "That's great. I just want a life where my name is on the spine of books. That's what I want."
Okay.
So that
And you went out and you pursued that. So I I did a little homework, right? And I'd like to jump into this a little bit. So you have a memoir called Bookends. Is that
I do.
okay?
Yeah.
So uh, truth be told, I also wrote a memoir. Interestingly enough, mine is called "We're Almost There: Living
Huh.
with Patience, Perseverance, and Purpose." We could swap books.
Yeah, we should.
Um,
I should have prepared better, read your book, and we could have released
no,
this book.
no, that's fine. We'll just start a
Okay.
good relationship.
Alright, alright,
Yeah,
alright. Okay, fine.
plenty of opportunity. But I
Wait,
would
tell me about your memoir.
it goes obviously only to a certain stage of life, but, 2 is actually a good transition into yours. So, uh, 2 impactful events in my life up to the stage when I wrote my first book were, um, finding my wife, which was a 10-year, process of dating and unsuccessfully, managing that whole process until I found, the woman that I married. And secondarily, after that and in the community I was in, that was I won't say abnormal, but it wasn't typical, okay?
Mhm.
Getting married in my early 30s. And then in addition to that, our first child was born with Down syndrome with a disability. So my memoir certainly talks about confronting life challenges from a bigger perspective, and in particular framed in terms of those uh,
Mm.
unique individual challenges that were navigated and negotiated, and to a certain degree still are, being revisited on different levels, to this day. So I think your memoir also, if I'm not mistaken, talks about different challenges you experience. So maybe you want to share with us a little bit what you talk about in your memoir.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me. Yeah, I think some of the bigger things were losing my best friend on 9/11, my college roommate, which is became a massive turning point in my life. I was 25. I just didn't. I've always been the type of person who thinks about death and worries about it, and is very curious and very. I've always been hyper attuned to the fact that we're living, all of that. But until my friend Stacy died, it didn't, in the way that you can understand something, but until it happens to you, you don't really understand it. So that sort of whacked me on the back of my head. And, um, you know, once you realize life can, like, literally in 1 second, someone can disappear from the planet for no rhyme or reason, or for some bad reason in her case. It just changed the way I approached my everyday life. It made me, ironically, I guess, less fearful in some ways, because, like, why not? I mean, if it could all end tomorrow, why not? But this is something I still wrestle with today, by the way, this whole, how do we make the most of our time thing. But that
I read
was
a piece that you wrote. I don't know if you wrote it. It was an interview. I think it's 10 lessons that you gleaned from this painful experience that you're sharing right now. And some of the themes were very much like, carpe diem, seize the day, kind of like, uh, your friend invites you out, go out, so on and so forth. Like, I think those were some of the things that I think that you
I know
mentioned.
it sounds so hokey, right? I mean, like, everyone knows carpe
Yeah.
diem and live and seize the moment and blah blah blah, but um I feel like, um and maybe you feel this way too, but when you get the message and you really get it, you want to, like, scream it to everybody else so that they get it too, and just be like, you guys, like, no, like, you can't just, like, go about your day and not think about this stuff. Like, so, I feel like I've been trying to, like, not that I'm the only one, like, many people are trying to, let other people know, but I don't know. I just feel like um, I've just wanted to share that, sense of urgency that comes through loss a little bit. Um, but I'm actually sort of doing an about face on the whole thing because I've just come. I mean, I'm I've spent my life sort of worrying, and not worrying. That sounds like intentionally worrying, like pre-worrying about everything so I can prepare, for any eventuality. Like, okay, like, this person's getting older. I'm gonna, like, let me just spend a few minutes, like, preparing myself like it's a pull-up at the gym, right? Like, this person's gonna leave us at some point. But I finally have just reached the conclusion that preparing for any sort of pain is useless. Like, you can know you're gonna experience pain, but no preparation makes it feel any better. So maybe I should just stop bothering. So now I'm trying to do a new mental game where I I I try to stop spending so much time preparing. It's like, if you told me, like, tomorrow, like, you're gonna for sure burn your hand on the pan on the stove. Like, I can spend the next day thinking about that, but as soon as my hand touches the pan, it's gonna hurt just as much. So, all I'm doing is ruining the day before I burned my hand. I mean, in some cases, if I could change the behavior and not go into the kitchen that day, that would be useful. But if you told me, like, for sure, "No, no, there's nothing you can do," then so my mental exercise of the moment is to, maybe spend less time doing all of that mental gymnastics for basically no gain.
I don't so I wanna push back on that a little bit if I may, if with your permission.
Push back.
I think a little
Yes.
bit I think it depends a little bit on kind of like what we're doing in that anticipatory or prep time. Like, I wanna say 2 things in terms of what you said. Just the example I was thinking of as you were sharing that. So I was at a gala last week. I go to a lot of events, and I'm sitting in the audience, and it was a wonderful charity that supports, IDF soldiers rehabilitation, and it was very compelling. There was a soldier up there who had lost his eyesight, and he was sharing his experience, how this organization helped rehabilitate him. And I was kind of it was interesting. I was kind of listening, and I was kind of taken by what he was saying, but I was also kind of a little bit checked out. It was a big room, and there was a lot going on. And then a friend next to me whispers to me, he says, he says to me, "This would have been a lot more powerful last year." Which I actually thought, which I actually maybe felt a little bit myself also, kind of like the war in Israel is the ceasefire is on or the war is over, however you want to say it. Like, the human condition is such that no matter how aware we are of how fragile life is, we also at the same time, I guess, we have defense mechanisms or triggers that maybe stop us from dwelling on that too much,
Mhm.
or to the degree that we're able to kind of escape from the tragedy or from the intensity, we do, and maybe that's even maybe that's even healthy, sometimes.
Mhm. Yes.
I think that's one thought about what you said. The other thought I have about what you said is just in terms of, um, I think a lot has to do with how we meaning, if the time is spent anticipating, like you use touching fire or burning being burnt, like, yeah, we can't control things, so we can't really stop the tragedy from transpiring, but to the degree that, like, if we can, like, there's someone in my life who was very dear to me who's confronting illness right now, so to the degree that I, not every day, but to the degree that I take him more seriously, or I take his calls more
Mhm.
seriously, or I take the time that we have to spend together, uh, more with a focus, so that's a benefit. I mean, yeah, I can't
I
change
see, yes.
the reality of what he is confronting, and I can't necessarily impact the clock or the timeline that he is on or anybody else is on, right? But I can take advantage of the opportunity that we have now. And if you
Mm,
do live with the intensity and the focus and the awareness that you're describing, having become more sensitive to at the sudden demise of your college roommate, so then you can't take advantage of those opportunities. And those are losses because that's meaningful, right? So that's I have found, like I say, in my experience that I do appreciate. I first of all, had a few times in my life where I've been blindsided by really bad things, and I hate that. Like, it's so disorienting. Uh,
mhm.
Um, and the benefit. By the way, there's actually even a traditional. It relates to the Torah. There's a traditional discussion or debate. We're reading right now the stories in Bereshit of the patriarchs and the matriarchs and development of the Jewish people. So at the end of in a couple weeks, there's the description of the death of Jacob, our forefather Jacob, and there's a discussion about uh, how God introduced into society that it used to be that people would sneeze and they would die. Apparently, that's why people say "Gesundheit" or "God bless you" when you sneeze. It's connected a little bit to this idea that apparently thousands of years ago people would sneeze and they would die.
Huh.
But God realized that that wasn't really the best approach because people need time to prepare their affairs and say their goodbyes. So we know even in this context that, people meet their demise. Sometimes it's sudden, sometimes it's prolonged, and anything in between. But there is a concept even in the Torah that there is some benefit to, we'll call, delay of game, because both for the individual and for the people around them have the opportunity uh, you know, to engage and to enjoy that time or make the most of that time. I think where people fall short is that they don't have any cognition that we're all on a clock, and then they just kind of don't. appreciate or take advantage of anything, or they think they always have time for everything, and that's not the case. But I think we all kind of have this dance of kind of finding the happy balance of like being cognizant and aware that life is precious and fickle and transient, and at the same time, living life and enjoying it to its fullest and not being overwhelmed by that cognition and realization. I don't know if any of that was helpful to you.
It was helpful. It was. Thank you. And thank
Okay.
you for sharing that. No, it's true. If what you're doing is saying like, okay, like my dog's 11, like let me stop what I'm doing and get on the ground and snuggle with her and, rub her belly or something, and I wouldn't have done that if I had just been taking advantage of her being there forever, then yes, okay, that's useful because it inspires action. I get that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I would say even and just as you said about your dog, so I'm blessed with, I have a lot of children, and the oldest is 20 and the youngest is 2,
wow.
and, a few in between, but even my 2-year-old, she's not gonna be 2 forever. This
Mhm.
is actually my 19-year-old daughter's room, but my 2-year-old daughter's room, is not purple, but but even just to enjoying her where she is right now, because she's not gonna be 2 forever, is also kind of a meaningful
Mhm.
thing to think about. So I think that, it doesn't always have to even be it could be the death of that moment in time. It doesn't even have to be the absolute disappearance from the
Yes.
universe, right? So
Yes.
even that.
Yes. Little losses as well. Even like something silly, like sometimes I get so sad when, one of my favorite stores closes or like a flavor of something gets discontinued or like I don't know. I feel the endings of things very profoundly and I've always liked to write about them, more so sometimes than writing about the joy of it all in the middle.
Okay. No, I mean, writing is a beautiful tool for expression. What are your thoughts? I actually struggle with this in terms of I find that I'm curious how much you use AI, artificial intelligence. As a writer, uh, I find that, frankly, there are times when it does a better job than I do. The same time, um, I used to love so much kind of working through the best formulation, the best way to concretize an idea. I think there's pros and cons to it. I'm curious what your thoughts are about it.
I
Has anybody ever asked you that before? Maybe they have, but I'm curious.
it's a good question. Well done. Um I don't use AI very much. The other day, somebody was trying to convince me to use it more and saying how good it has gotten from like the last time I tried it, whatever. So they said, just put it in, like write an essay about blah, blah, blah in the style of Zibby Owens or something, right? And see what happens. So in 2 seconds, an essay came out and it's not how I would have written it, but I could definitely see some commonalities in like how I structure sentences even and like sentence length or like paragraph like it kind of looked like something I might write but it didn't sound like anything I would write, which came as an enormous relief because um you know I also I met somebody at some like Jewish events. Anyway, I met somebody who ran this AI like podcasting voice thing, and they were like, "We can translate your voice from your podcast into any language and then just like publish it." So they literally pressed a button and it was me speaking in fluent Spanish and me speaking in fluent French and Greek and like just like all these languages. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, and it sounded exactly like me. So that terrified me because who's to say someone doesn't do that to my voice, say something I don't mean at all, send it to someone. So I am very scared about this whole prospect. Um, not in a way that I'm gonna do anything about necessarily, like, whatever, it's just happening. I don't know why I feel like other things I'm scared about, I feel like I have more control over. I don't have control over any of it, but, um, I think it can be helpful. Um, there's another website that they came and met with us, and they work with publishers, and you can put in submitted manuscripts, and they'll, like, rank them for you and sort them and tell you how commercially successful they'll be and all this stuff, and it's like, on the one hand, it's like, "Oh, wow, well, that's amazing. That's, like, so and so's job," but we ended up being like, "W we don't wanna do that because what like, no what machine can tell us, like, what's gonna make us cry or what's gonna make us feel a certain way. There might be elements that are important, but like we're looking for something specific in the books that we publish. And so, and like, what would it say about a company if they're using AI in this way? Yes, I see that, like, I see that it can be useful. So anyway, I acknowledge that there are potentially benefits. I worry about um, its impact. Like, why is this so necessary? Like, why is this? All the people who are going to lose their jobs. The other day I like picked up a phone at a hotel to call the front desk, and it was an AI person. And I was like, seriously, can you not just like give me the front desk? Like, why do we need a robot to do this? Like, I just need to talk to a person right now. Who is this helping? It's not helping the former receptionist who doesn't have a job. It's certainly not helping me. Who is it helping? The owner of the hotel. That's it. Saving money. So anyway,
I
I
hear
mean,
you.
I could do a whole podcast
No,
on
no,
this. How do you feel about AI? And I never use it to write myself, like
right. No,
so.
I find that a lot of times, like, I always use it either as a starting point, and then I will revamp it, or I will write, and then I will let it hear what it has to say in terms of how to make better what I'm working on. And I may or may not, take the feedback. I use it more kind of like as a call almost like an assistant to the degree that I am always just like, if I have an idea, I like to just like see what AI has to put. I call chat. I use ChatGPT. So in our house, like, what does chat have to say about it?
Mhm.
Sometimes chat says really brilliant things, and sometimes chat says complete idiotic things that are just wrong and inaccurate. I mean, it's not, it's by far, it's not infallible. I'm sure there are better versions. I'm sure there are better, more sophisticated, AI than I'm currently using. But that being said, yeah, it remains to be seen. That's the truth. I think it really remains to be seen. But I think in the creative fields, like we're discussing, I think it is. I think it's good to kind of really maybe sharpen our own work at the end of the day, but not to replace or transplant or to use instead of. I mean, that's would be my. But I will admit that there is a certain, depending on your nature, how lazy a person may be, it definitely can be tempting to rely on it too much. I think that is definitely it's a crutch. It can be a crutch, and I think that's never helpful in terms of our own development and growth. I was thinking before you were joking around about, let's say, wanting to be a rabbi on some level, but I actually think you are in the sense that my understanding is you've basically built communities or communities from scratch in terms of uh, your publishing business and in terms of what you've created online and through podcasts. So, talk a little bit about what it takes to build community, particularly in these fractured times.
Well, that's lovely of you to say. Um,
That's what AI told me. I'm joking.
ah, I see how now I know how you're so well prepared. Thank you, AI, for preparing, using all my stuff. How to build community. Yeah, this is something I think about a lot. Um, I'm sure there are far better ways, but my approach is incredibly slow. It is like one room at a time. It's one event. It's one post. It's one conversation. It's inviting people in, always trying to find ways to connect people. That's not something I'm doing as a means to an end. That's sort of just like part of who I am. I'm always like, oh, you should talk to so and so, and like, you two should meet, and did you two know, and I like making those types of connections. But I think scaling the community is challenging because, well, there's some things, some initiatives like my book club, right? I have a book club. It's not the main focus like other places that really prioritize a book club, but I happen to have a book club like on the side. You can like order the books or you can just come to our meetings and the authors are always there. For a little bit, I was like, why don't I try to start chapters? I've started, by the way, so many things that didn't pan out, but that's just like part of growing anything, I think. Um, so I tried doing chapters in all these different places, chapters of Zibby's book club. They would read the book I picked, but meet locally. Um, it ended up not working for me. I know now, like, I just saw on WhatsApp or something that, like, Reese's Book Club is doing that too. This was like, I tried this years ago, but she has a bigger, like, a bazillion times bigger platform, so, like, theoretically, it should work, but it still is, like, not taking off from what I can see. I mean, the group size was relatively small given how huge an audience. All to say, like, l- n- I don't think people spontaneously gather without someone or something anchoring them. So it becomes less scalable, but you have to someone has to like put in the time and the work. Like if I want a community around what I'm doing and the conversations I'm having with authors or whatever, like then I go on the retreat and I like spend a weekend with 40 strangers and they spread the word and that's great. And if they don't, they don't. We had a great weekend. And so I don't know. My approach has just been one small thing at a time, leading to some bigger things, some different directions. I think listening, like, I love hearing people's stories. Like, I know I was asking you yours, but like, this is actually like something I'm really interested in. It's like I don't ever get bored of other people's stories, and so I try to create places where people can share their stories. Um, Going on the assumption that other people are interested by stories, which they are, maybe not as much as some others, but so I think creating the circumstances, having someone bringing people together, and not just like trusting um, that it just happens. I think. Um, what else can I do? I mean, I do like funny tongue-in-cheek things too. Like when I toured for my novel Blank, I called it like the Zibbyverse tour because the LA Times at one point called what I do the Zibbyverse, and I was like, oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So I made like friendship bracelets and pretended it was like a rock concert, made concert T-shirts, and like did all these fun things. Like, and then people would like wear their Zibbyverse bracelets and be like, yes, like I'm a fan, like woohoo. So I think it's also just not taking yourself too seriously, um, like and looking for input. I don't know. I don't feel at a remove from my community. I am like in my own community. Like I'm not like a celebrity like coming in and forming a community around me. Like it has grown because I have grown my circle of people and like it's all like gone like that. That was a long and rambling.
No, it's very interesting. I mean, so for the last 15 months now, I've been at the helm of the Allgemeiner, which is a Jewish media platform. And I can definitely, two of the things you said very deeply resonate. A, we've already tried a lot of different things. Some have really been very successful, some not as much, but you only kind of, you learn through trial and
Yeah.
error and throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks and what doesn't. So that of course, uh, I relate to. And then also we're kind of trying to we're a kind of a legacy media brand, but at the same time, we've been around 53 years, but we're very startup-y also.
Mhm.
N Trying to create kind of live events and community, and I was listening to, Scott Galloway talk to Dan Senor, uh,
Mhm.
just last week, like, on Thanksgiving on Dan's Call Me Back podcast, and they were talking about kind of this, live events and this whole phenomenon. Obviously, like, the Free Press does live events, a lot of people do live events. It's not like an original idea. I always like to do something that's really out of the box or different. It's not always so easy. Sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel, but in terms of trying to create community and having people identify with your community. I think is a little bit challenging in terms of how do you create brand awareness, brand identity that people want to be part of your community. They want to be associated with your community. So I don't know what your
Yeah.
thoughts are about that.
Yeah. Um, so interesting. And I've spoken to the team at, like, Open Door Media and Unpacked,
Yeah,
and,
sure.
they've been
Great.
doing moving more into events as well. I went to one of their events recently. They were like, "Well, how you do so many of these." I was like, "You just did, like, one event with, again, Dan Senor, and, Noam Weisbach, or,
Yeah,
it
sure.
like, it was, like, sold out at the Y, and I was like, "You don't need my help. Like, what are you talking about? That was amazing." I do think that it's very different when I do think there needs to be an in-person component. It doesn't have to be you being the in-person person,
Right.
but even when you see other people and you're like, "Oh, I feel like I was there," or, "I could see myself in that room," or, well, I don't know. I think all of that has an effect. It's not nobody, like, longs to be a member of a Facebook group because of just the group, right? I mean, it's because of what it signifies that you're, like, a part. And actually, I'm reading this book, Mattering, by Jennifer Wallace, which is coming out soon. I'm interviewing her later this week, and, her whole premise is the sort of the meaning of life, as it were, or how to get the most out of life is to feel that you matter by, having people see you and appreciate you for who you are, and not just sort of going through the motions, giving back, all of that. But she kind of reframes it in a way that speaks directly to sort of this thing, which is how do you how do you make people feel valued when they're in a group? Even she gave an example of firefighters who don't even feel valued because they do their thing and then they go right back to the firehouse. And sometimes they don't get thanked or they don't feel thanked. Anyway, I'm
No, no, they actually, as you were saying that, so Dan actually made the remark that he was talking about how they put together an event with his Israeli cohorts with Nadav Ayal and Amit Segal, and within
mhm,
6 days they filled up one of those massive synagogues.
yep,
But he was saying that what it really astounded them was that people wanted to feel part of something.
they do. Yes.
That like more than they were there to hear the speakers, they were there to be part of something, be part of a community. So that goes to what you're talking about also, that when
Yep.
people feel part of something and they feel that that they're valued, that makes it compelling to join a community.
Well, look at Taylor Swift. I mean, case in point, people have heard all her songs before. They're not going because they haven't heard her sing those songs. They're
Mhm.
going to be part of the audience and that unique experience, and just to be near her and to hear it for themselves. I think that's why people are attending more events and getting out there and just wanting to be in the audience. Sometimes, like, I'm going to do an event and I'm like, I feel like I've told all these stories before. Like, why? Like, I know so and so has already been to this other event. Like, I'm sure this is so boring. And I'm like, well, I don't go to events only to hear new things. I go to be with the people, right? Like I'll listen to an author read a book I have read already just to hear them read it in their own words and be around people who are also listening to those words. So yeah, I do think it is a fundamental instinct of all of us to want to connect and be in community. And as a rabbi, that is like under that's a premise underlying everything, right?
I actually wrote a book after COVID called Together Again,
Oh,
reimagining the relationships that anchor our lives.
there you
And
go.
I included it's I mean, all this it's interesting. I mean, all this is post-COVID, but I feel like that's already kind of, uh, it's receded a little bit, COVID. I think it's just for some reason today more than ever, we need to be part of
Yes.
other people. It used to be, post-COVID, okay, but now it's not even that. I think it's just there's meaning and there is value in not living to oneself.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, we have to wind down, but I wanted to ask you, we can always continue the conversation. But I wanted to ask you, so I noticed online that I was taken that, some of your, I guess, very vulnerable personal moments you decided to kind of share in public forums. I was curious. You write about going through a divorce and your children and so on and so forth. Um, what 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 gave you the courage to address that in a public forum, uh, and why did you feel that you wanted to do that?
I've been doing that since I was 14. I wrote an essay, not intending it for public consumption, but I wrote one afternoon. I was really upset. I had gained a bunch of weight after my parents' divorce. I felt like everybody was treating me differently. I was tired of it. I didn't like that my body would dictate how people change, how they treated me. Anyway, I just like wrote this whole thing and my mom found it and was like, "Oh, Zeb, you have to send this to a magazine. It's going to help other girls." And so she did. She encouraged me to do it. So I sent it into 17 and they published it. And I got so many letters back that were so nice. And I felt so much less alone. They said they felt less alone, but I also felt less alone. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I thought I was going through that like by myself in my bedroom, like writing on my computer. That's not at all what's been happening." So I guess I'm like a sucker for positive reinforcement because like anything I do that I feel like people say, "Oh, thank you, that makes me feel less alone." I do more of that. Um, that's what gives me joy and gives me a sense of meaning in the world, knowing I can help people in that way. And it's so easy for me. Like writing about my feelings is so easy and it's so helpful to me, and then the fact that it's so helpful to others, and then people now, instead of just writing for magazines, I can write essentially like 3 lines of what it would have been like a 1,000-word essay and people know what I'm talking about and then comment, and then in the comments, people are helping each other. So I feel like, um, I don't feel brave doing it. I do it when something's bothering me so much and I get that twinge like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like so like I'm going through this by myself." Then I say, "I'm totally not going through this by myself." And for whatever reason, that night that I posted that about my kids, um, I didn't even like talk to my husband about it. Like we're like super, super close. We talk about everything. And my I I just didn't I wanted to write about it. I wanted to put it out to people who I knew out there would be other moms who were going through this. Dads too, I'm sure, but like it was, you know. And so I found them in like 2 seconds, and like an hour later I had like 100 friends like telling me
Uh,
what like I would have gotten a coffee. So anyway, I don't find it brave. I find it incredibly reassuring and um it makes me feel like my life has meaning.
Beautiful. Do you ever get pushback, like, for people who don't necessarily like, what you're sharing? Like, do people ever give you, like, pushback, like, why are you sharing that? Or if it makes them feel threatened or uncomfortable? Has that ever happened to you?
It's happened a lot with the Jewish stuff. People don't like a lot of that, so I block a lot of people. I
Is
have
that
had a lot.
Jewish people
Oh,
or
no. I mean, I don't.
not that you're aware of? Yeah,
Not that I'm necessarily aware of, but no, people who are just saying mean, snarky things. Like, get out. Like, go bother somebody else. Like, I don't have time for this. Um, so I think that's the other thing I guess about community. It's like taking care of it, making sure you don't let in people who are gonna, storm the sandbox type of thing. So I
yeah.
try. I try to cull it if I can, a little bit.
Okay, as we wind down, I'm gonna ask a few kind of just quick, kind of shorter type questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
Uh, this is, like, like a kind of an easy one for somebody like yourself, kind of like, give me uh, a book that everybody should read. Like, it could be a current book, it could be an old book, like a book that you feel everybody needs to read this book.
Um,
And it can't be your own books.
no, I'm not gonna say my own books. Um, I just finished reading Heart the Lover a little bit ago. Uh, by Lily King. She's one of my favorite authors, and it's a book that will make you cry, and in the best way. I loved it. Try that.
Okay, what's it called again? It was called
Heart the Lover by Lily King.
Heart the Lover.
Yeah. There's just something about it.
Okay. Uh, Interesting. Did you ever meet an author that you were very disappointed in the personal encounter after reading their work?
Yes.
Yes. Frequently? Infrequently?
Not frequently, but it's happened and it's very disappointing.
And what do you attribute that to? The person just we don't need to know who it is specifically, but it's like it's a complete disconnect between the work and who the individual is, or what would you say?
I think it's like, for me, it's arrogance that I find incredibly off-putting.
Yeah. I could I see that, I could hear that, that's for sure. Okay, I'll ask one final question. Uh, One podcast guest that you would love to interview that you have not yet, succeeded in, getting behind a mic in front of you, who would that be?
Um, there was just somebody the other day that I was like, "Oh my gosh, I would love to interview that person." Um, I don't know. I've always wanted to interview Oprah. Um, right now, I mean, yeah, I
Is that
like.
is that in the realm of possibility? Are you working
I don't
on it?
know. You never know. I'd like to interview Sarah Jessica Parker.
Okay.
Um, random, but she's doing a lot for books right now, and I was a huge Sex and the City fan. I'm sure there are more intellectual answers to this, like I don't know, God or something, but uh, I'm gonna stick with the superficial, more superficial end of things.
Okay, no, terrific. Zibby, I want to thank you for your time, for your insights. I feel like we've just scratched the surface here, but I do think that we did touch on some very powerful ideas and constructs and concepts. I want to thank you for all that you do for the world, and in particular, what you're doing for the Jewish people. And it was great to have you on the J100 podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really enjoyable. Thank you for making it so.